And we're live. All right. So, I'm Steven. That's Erock. That's Tiffany. That's John. We are from Just Got Played. And we are gathered here today to discuss our favorite game designers. You know, sometimes when I put these list titles up, I'll say like best or top 10 or something like that. But I really feel favorite game designers is maybe a better label because that is such a hard one to judge and will be such a wide range between people. And to be honest, I think if you tried to come up with like an objective measure of who is a good game designer, then once you rack and stacked things based on objective letters, that the list would sort of be disappointing, you know?
Look, I have champagne tastes. My favorite are the best. It's not arguable.
Well, I will tell you something that is objectively true and not arguable is that if you're going to do a list about game designers, it absolutely 100% has to include Dr. Reiner Knizia. And so I'm going to give an honorary designation to Dr. Knizia so you don't have to put him on your list, right?
It's like a free spot in bingo.
It's a free spot. I mean, I look at my collection and I don't even know how many games I have of his. I mean, at least 10, right? And I've probably had more than that I've given away or traded away and
played at some point. Or
and played. And I mean, he's made some games that I don't like as well, right? But he's made some fantastic games too. And, you know, we were talking about doing our top 3 here. He would have made my top 3 if I was making a top 3. But instead, I'll get to do 3 extra because I'm just blanket putting out Dr. Knizia because he has to be mentioned in every game designer list.
This is such an Erock move. I love it. It's powerful.
It's fiat power because
here I made the list we were supposed to, but also here's some extra ones.
Well, from now, but that is objectively true. Dr. Knizia belongs on every game designer list. Now we can get subjective about who are our favorite game designers. And I don't know how you all made your list. I mean, to me, the number one thing was if I heard about this designer, like this designer made a game, right? I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm interested.
Is that a requirement? They had to have made a game?
Take my money. Well, I hear they've made a new game, and I'm like, here, take my money, right? You know,
right?
Like,
yeah. Auto buys. I'm automatically just hey, if they put one out, I'm getting it. That's a good one. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I hear Knizia, there's a new Knizia game out, the first thing I ask is, well, what's it a re-edition of? You know, but that's but most designers, it's what is this new game? Okay, I want to hear about that, right? So that was like one of my key things. I also factored in whether they'd made some stinkers, right? If I'd played a game by a designer and it's really bad, that sort of lowered my personal ranking. But then also just the games that are in my collection, because I can think some games are good. But if the game isn't in my collection, is that really my favorite designer? You know? So anyway, I don't know. John,
that's a lot more thought than I put into it.
Yeah, well, how about you, man? You just winged it?
Well, I went and looked up my favorite designer. I don't know their first name, but I think it's pronounced Kickstartier. They produce thousands of games a year. It's crazy.
Most of them are crap, though.
What I did is I went and looked at my shelf because I think you did hit, like, if you don't own the game from them, you can't really call them your favorite. And I looked at some of my favorites and said, all right, have they done a bunch of other games as well? Because to me, I have to like multiple games from them to be considered my favorite designer. Because, you know, if you make a really amazing one-off, that's great, but you're not my favorite designer. That just happens to be a great game. So I can kind of combine that. I have to have it. I have to like multiple games by that person, and I have to like the style of creation that they do. Maybe there's a genre that they're really strong in, or maybe there's a genre that they defined. Hint, hint. That really is just evocative of what I like about board games, and they just fit to that niche really well.
Yeah.
Both of mine are all of those criteria, including creating a genre/niche.
Cool. Erock, what'd you?
Yeah, this was really hard for me, just because there's so many games, and like it's kind of like you guys were saying, like I might like 2 or 3 things and not like 3 or 4 things that somebody made, or it's really hard to try to find that sweet spot. Like I could have made a top 10. I probably could have made a top 20 list. of designers as I just kept going through and going, oh yeah, I really like this designer, and looking at them like, yeah, I like those games. So this was really hard for me to narrow it down to 3. I think in the end, it just came down to who had the biggest, most positive impact on my hobby experience. And I think that's kind of where I landed as far as my list goes. But it was very hard.
See, that's interesting because I don't take away for games that I didn't personally enjoy. If they made 75 games and 70 of them are great and 5 are just absolute stinkers, I don't care about that because they still made 70 great games that I really like. So to me, having a few stinkers, it just comes with the territory.
Well, having a few stinkers if you have 70 great ones is fine. But
just,
having 3 good
odds.
ones and 1 stinker is...
It's race. It's all about the ratio. But to me, like, that matters less if I really like the other stuff they put out.
Nice. How about you, Tiffany? Did you have any rhyme or reason?
So I basically asked myself what parts of our game room spark the most joy for me, because we largely have our games organized by designer or publisher, and so I asked myself which parts of the game room give me the most joy, and that's kind of how I picked my favorite designers. I was like, well, there's that section right there that I really love, and I'm always looking at that section right there. So that's kind of how I decided mine. Not super scientific, just, I let the Marie Kondo system of finding my favorite designer lead me.
Yeah. That's interesting. I couldn't organize my shelves by designer. I mean, probably if you picked any random game off my shelf, I wouldn't know who the designer is, to be honest. It's not something that I pay a lot of attention to, unless they show up multiple times, and then I, start to sort of internalize
There's a shelf of yours that you could just call Gamelin Games.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, spoiler alert, Scott Alms is not on my list. I do really like all the Tiny Epic games, and I like his game Cosmic Colonies, but they're just good. Right? There's no great one in there. And that was another thing for me. Like, there had to be a great game from that person to make my top 3. I mean, if I was doing a top 20, Scott Alms would probably be on there, right? Along with some other designers who, like, I like 2 really good games of theirs a lot and then have never played something else by them, But when you're talking 3 people, it's there's a lot of criteria to cut down on.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, Erock, you want to start us off?
Sure. So, again, this was a really hard list, but I very much agree with pretty much all the sentiments you guys are saying. It's about, how many good games have they had and what is a great game that they made. And my number 1 for this list is Cory Konieczka. I feel like I've had so much fun playing his games, and he basically was or is Fantasy Flight. I mean, he's got Twilight Imperium, Battlestar Galactica. He did StarCraft, and then Forbidden Stars, which was the kind of the reimplementation of StarCraft, Star Wars Outer Rim. This guy's all over the place. He's got so many good hits under his belt. And for me, Star Wars Rebellion. That is an absolute masterpiece of a game. And as far as I'm concerned, that's his masterpiece. But this is, I think, overall, his games have wowed me more consistently than probably anybody else I've played. And it's different kinds of games. Now, you could say that they're all kind of war games, and they kind of are war games, but they're very different. Like, Star Wars Rebellion is so much different than Twilight Imperium. Like, they're worlds apart. Yes, there's a war going on in all of it, but it's so different. And
Did he do John Company?
Sorry?
Was he the one that did John Company version 2?
No, that's Cole Wehrle.
Oh, right.
He's on my honorable mentions list, which we'll get to later when we have an extra 20 minutes.
I bet we will.
Mentions. But yeah, I think Cory Konieczka is awesome. I think he does a great job, and I've had so much fun playing this game. So that's my number 1.
Nice. All right, John. Erock just stole Battlestar Galactica thunder from you, right?
Wasn't on my list.
Yeah. All right, well, what is?
Well, frankly, that can't be on my list because I've only ever played Battlestar from him, other than Outer Rim, which I do like, but I don't love. So he wouldn't fit because of that criteria, but I do love his designs and his Battlestar. It's just not games I often play. But the number 1 on my list is someone who created an entire genre, in my opinion. You could probably argue it. But when I say the phrase point salad, who comes to mind?
Yeah.
It's our boy Stefan Feld. he just has such fun, unique, varied designs. I love the core concept of a point salad of just like there's this big space to play in, and you can do a little bit of everything. You can focus on things, you can do this, that, and the other, but there's no just like, hey, if you do this, you're gonna win every time. There's no big money strategy and deck building games kind of thing. It's just you have to play the opponents, and my favorite part of games is playing against opponents, which is why I don't really enjoy co-op games, because I like that back and forth of just like I have to predict what Erock's going to do, I have to outplay him if I want to win, and I have to be 2 turns ahead of him. So to me, point salad games are usually the best version of that, because there's a lot going on and you really just have to play what's going on while having a long-term strategy. It's tactical. It's got a lot going on, and I think that Feld created the genre for a reason, and he's kind of perfected it. But my favorite game from him isn't really a total point salad. It's Merlin, which I love, but nobody will play a game with me. But
That's a point salad.
It is, but it's not entirely, because the wastes are pretty much how you win or lose that game. But regardless, it does have that point salad feel to it, but the design of it's really neat. It looks great on the table. And just if you're talking about a variety of games from one designer, there's something in there for everybody. There's a game from him that you will enjoy, no matter what kind of gamer you are. So to me, he's got that longevity, the creativity, the uniqueness. That's why he's my favorite designer.
Yeah, totally a prolific game designer. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tiffany, what do you got?
Great. So I'm going to go against the grain a little bit because I'm going to start with my third. This was the easiest for me to pick because one of the reasons that I love this particular designer is because he also does his own artwork. And so because I'm such a big fan of his art style, it makes it really easy to love his games. And that person is Ryan Laukat. So I super love the world that he creates when he makes games. I love the art style. I love the storytelling. Well, and in his games that storytelling is involved, but I just really love the world that he creates. Some of my favorites are Above and Below and Near and Far. But he had some other notable titles like Klondike Rush, Megaland, Sleeping Gods, Babe Likes, Empires of the Void, and City of Iron. So yeah, he was like easily my third choice because it's just, you put one of his games on the table and I'm just like, oh, it's beautiful. And I'm instantly intrigued and excited to play. So Ryan Laukat was and he's got so much fun storytelling stuff, and he takes you on a fun adventure. So what's not to love?
He's got a new game coming called Creature Caravan, right? That's them.
I think that's true.
Is he the designer or just a publisher on that one?
I'm not sure. I've been following along enough.
Yeah, it's definitely got that art style, and I think it's got some of that storytelling there, and it's goes up to 6 players with, I think, simultaneous play, so it sounds like a game that would sort of fit in my wheelhouse.
Now you have my interest.
Yeah. So, well, if maybe it ends today, the crowdfunding campaign for it. There's like a crowdfunding campaign for that and Islebound Deluxe or something. So, yeah, you may want to check that out. It's on GameFound, I think.
I agree with Tiffany very much, which is why this is also my number 3. So that's our first crossover.
Wow.
His games are just so evocative, and when you're playing Above and Below, it's like you're playing through an adventure story. And there's so many paths, and they all feel like equally well written, and just the artwork. It's everything in one package. It's a unique, creative person. I totally agree. Same place on my list.
The only problem with having a crossover is that just gives Erock more time later to talk.
Well, it means we'll get out of here before 10:45.
All right. Well, it's funny when Tiffany said she was bucking the trend. I was like, what were you going to talk about, like Jamey Stegmaier's cats or something? What did that mean? Okay, so you went to number 3. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and start at number 1 because this is the person that, to me, if I hear their name is attached to a game, I am the most interested. This is the person who piques my interest the most, and a relatively new game designer. Not a lot of games under their belt compared to everybody we talked about here, but that is Luke Laurie. So, John, you talk about creating a genre like point salad. Luke Laurie, to me, though, created something that is just a great evolution on worker placement, which is in a lot of his games, when you pull back, you have something to do, which gives you a strategic reason to pull back other than just, and it's not just like, oh, well, skip a turn, right? Other work placement games, it feels like, well, let's just skip a turn because I'm pulling back and then keep going, right? So, I really like that. And that's present in a lot of his games. I mean, Whistle Mountain and Cryo and Dwellings of Eldervale. I really like all of those games. I like the Manhattan Project Energy Empire. I think the game of his that I like the most is Cryo. So Cryo allows you to upgrade your drone platform, and when you recall the drones, you trigger the different things that you've done. But then there's also this area control thing going down on the planet. There's a sabotage going on. It's a lot of worker placement. I just really like everything that's going on there. That game, I think, flew under the radar compared to a lot of his other games, but I really like it a lot. Now, I haven't played Stones of Fate, a game of his from like 2015. So, maybe that's a stinker. I don't know. And he's got this new one coming out called Andromeda's Edge that looks fascinating to me, but it's long and heavy.
But that's just Dwellings of Eldervale in sci-fi.
I think it may be even more complicated and longer.
Yeah,
though.
I agree. It's like an advanced version of that, but it is kind of the same evolution of the same game.
Yeah, and I would love that.
Not that
I would
that's a
love
bad
to
thing
play
necessarily.
that.
I'd like to play that too. I just don't know if I'm running out to buy it because, as you can see, we have Dwellings.
Right there. I mean, I'm saving it to maybe play at a con just because I mean, if I bought it, I'm not sure who I would play it with. I don't think it's the right game for
You'd
my
play it
gaming
with
group.
me.
Wow, yeah, well, maybe I should have gotten it then. Yeah, more than anybody else I'm going to talk about today, Luke Laurie. If I hear that he's attached to a game as a game designer, I'm like very interested in what's going on there.
That would have been my fourth. They were just below Luke.
Nice.
Just
Laukat.
FYI, when you guys actually feature someone, I'm knocking them off my honorable mentions list, and so far,
I love Antoine Bauza.
you're all 3 for 3. So you're
Oh, wow.
shortening my
Okay.
speech. Good job.
Well, all right. Well, I like all of the designers that have been mentioned, but they wouldn't have been on my short list, I don't think. I mean, Ryan Laukat, definitely good stuff. Cory Konieczka. I don't know if I played a Cory Konieczka game, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You've never played Rebellion or Twilight Imperium?
Star Wars Rebellion? I thought you said Outer Rim was him.
Yeah, both.
Oh, okay.
both.
Well, I played Rebellion. Rebellion was good. Okay. See, I play games and I don't know who designed them.
I don't read the box. I just play the
And
game.
you've played BSG, right?
No, I have it. Still haven't played it.
John.
I've offered many times. He has to be willing to play.
It's the
That's
opportunity.
true, yeah.
It's the opportunity cost. Hey,
Not
do
too
you want
long
to play?
ago, I had two friends that hadn't played it. They came over. We played a full game of Battlestar Galactica with Teach, and then we played a second game of it right after because they liked it so much. So you can't blame this one on me. This is a
Wow.
Steven problem.
Yeah, I mean it is. I just don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's circle around again. Erock, what do you got for your next pick?
Okay, my next pick. I'm positive this is not going to be a crossover with anybody. This is kind of an Erock, right up my alley pick here. My second pick is Simone Luciani. I freaking love his games, man. I was looking at the list. I'm like, man, Zolkin's fantastic. Darwin's Journey, man, we had a lot of fun with Darwin's Journey. The Voyages of Marco Polo, that's a great game. And of course, the crowning achievement of all of it, Lorenzo Il Magnifico. These are fantastic games. It's not something that if somebody said Simone Luciani's making a new game, I might be like, okay, and not even realize that this is the guy I like who makes these games. You know what I'm saying? But kind of the research and all that really kind of honed me in on, wow, he made all this stuff, and I love all this stuff. And he actually does have a new game coming out with David Turczi.
They've worked on several together, right?
They have worked on several games, and Turczi caught my eye too, most notably for Anachrony. But I'm knocking him off my honorable mention list right now, as I'm talking about him with Simone Luciani. They're coming out with a game called Nucleum, so I'm kind of psyched to get that on the table. And I mean, once it comes out, obviously. But I'm like, ooh, wow, Luciani and Turczi, that's awesome. I want to play.
that game is big in the hotness right now. I think it was really popular at SN. It's going to be in the hot game rooms at BGG Con. So yeah, Board and Dice has a hit on their hands with that one.
So surely you'll play it and let us know how it is, right?
It's on my list of things to play at BGG Con.
You have a big list.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
I don't have a huge list to play at BGG Con because I don't want to. I mean, Patrick and little Eric are going to be there, so I want to play games they want to play too, right? I can't just be like, we're playing my games. Shut up.
That's what Erock would do.
I mean, I could do that. I'm not going to do that. All right, cool. John, what's next on your list?
All right, so another person that on my list is, again, it's created that niche, the genre, the person, like if you say this type of game, everyone knows instantly who you're talking about if you've read the box. And that is the person that created Legacy Games, and that is my boy Rob Daviau. He's worked on a lot of stuff, including Betrayal at House on Haunted Hill. And then after leaving from creating games for other people, he's like, you know what? I'm going to create my own genre. He started with Risk Legacy, which I maintain, if you can stomach 15 games of Risk, it's one of the greatest board game sessions that you'll ever have. If you think you know what's in the boxes in Risk Legacy, you are deadly wrong.
You are dead wrong.
You have no idea. You have no idea. Zero chance. But then after he's helped evolve Werewolf and all these other things, and just the genre itself of legacy games took hold really hard, and a bunch of them came out. So people are kind of a little bit burned out about him. But you have to acknowledge that just being able to create that subgenre or niche like that, and just have so many rich games across different ways that you've innovated on in ways that nobody ever saw coming. To me, that's what makes a great designer, and I think that he's my second favorite for that reason.
Well, good job. You knocked him off my honorable mentions. Here's my issue with Rob Daviau. All right, now I like him a lot. He almost made my list. Like it was down to the wire, but he's credited with something like 141 games. He's made Clue games. He's made Monopoly games. He made like 20 expansions for HeroScape.
Yeah, I mean, he worked at Hasbro.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his job.
Yeah, but all right, hold on. So that's
but he did a good job.
That kind of goes into the other part of my thing. I don't think I necessarily ever played anything that just he made. He's always one of like 5 people on a game.
Risk Legacy?
Yeah, Legacy was just him, I'm pretty sure.
I think I don't know. I don't have it.
I have 2 boxes in the living room. I can go look real quick.
Wow, you played it twice?
I played it once. My wife played it once, and I got a sealed copy that I'm saving for a special occasion.
Okay, interesting. But I'm not taking away from it. Like I said, it was right down to the wire. He almost made my list. It's just that some of the things I'm like, I mean, yeah, I hear you. He worked for Hasbro, but also,
and then he went and co-founded Restoration Games,
which is really good. And
have you ever played Thunder Road Vendetta?
I have played Thunder Road Vendetta, indeed.
And stop talking crap about my boy.
I feel like it's almost cheating because yes, but he's re-implementing these. They weren't really his games. I mean, yes, he's bringing them into the modern age.
He's taking roll and write games from the 70s and making one of my favorite games of the year.
But he's re-implementing it. I mean, I hear you. Like I said,
that's a recreation. I will say, Restoration games, you would think it's like you're just repackaging old games. They're not. They are adding mechanics that add so much depth and flavor to these games that they're
I agree 100%. I'm just saying none of that was theirs to begin with. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. I feel like the Dark Tower is Dark Tower in name only. The new Dark Tower, right? I feel like it's its own game.
They take it and they build it up into a modern game.
Yeah.
You know what? Why don't you take Go Fish and you go make a modern game for it, and then when it's amazing, then you can talk crap.
Go Fish Legacy.
I'll be back in
Go
7.5
Fish Legacy.
years.
Do you have a 7? It's not in the game yet. It's in an envelope. We haven't unlocked it.
Oh man, I just opened up the coelacanth envelope.
Where was it? Under the sink.
It was in my bedroom the whole time. How did he do that?
Rob Daviau, you've done it again.
Rob Daviau partners with Chris Angel. Here we go.
I'd watch that. I'd watch that show.
I'd play whatever game that was.
Yeah. All right, Tiffany, save us.
All right. right, so my number two was a designer that I think really has brilliant games. They're lots of fun. If Babe would let us own every game he's made, I would absolutely love to have this collection. It's Vital Lacerda. So he's made Kanban EV, Lisboa, my personal favorite, The Gallerist. He's just got some really, really phenomenal games. You can see, wait, I don't, one of my shoulders. I can't do backwards stuff, but I think he's over one of my shoulders right now. But he just really makes beautiful games that are complex and thought-provoking and a lot of fun, and they put you on the edge of your seat. That's definitely The Gallerist is one of those games that the whole time I play, I'm like hitting Erock because I'm like, oh God, I need it to be my turn. Like I need it to be my turn. And I really love Vital Lacerda's games. I'm not necessarily always up for Lacerda because I'm getting old and I don't necessarily have the endurance that I used to have. It's definitely more of a weekend game than a weeknight game for me now at this point, but I still love them, and I think Vital Lacerda's games are really fun.
I would like to play Lisboa, but I think the only Lacerda I've ever played is Kanban, and I really enjoyed that. That's a good solid
If you don't
game.
get time for Battlestar, you don't got time for Lacerda.
You know, I played
Just
Kanban at one of the Dice Tower conventions, and there was a teach and then a playthrough, and I mean, it's not like I was watching the clock. I don't know how long it actually took, but it didn't feel long, and that was cool.
I agree that about Lacerda. Yes, they are long and they are heavy, and you are in it, but time flies when you're playing a Lacerda, man, because you're involved and you're in it and you're spinning the gears the whole time.
You just look up after 10 minutes and you're like, oh, there's a world out here. You're just so engrossed in it.
Screw that world out there. I want to be back in.
Coming to see you, Vital.
All right.
Knocking it off my list. Good job.
I was wondering how much crossover you two were going to have. I know, obviously, you share the same game collection, so there's a lot of commonality there. You know, when I was making my list, I knew right away, like, Luke Laurie was going to be number one on my list. I've talked about that before. He's the name I'm most interested in. But then I started, looking through my collection. I have all my games entered on Board Game Geek, so there's a page where you can go look all the games by designer. Although, you can have one game with like 12 promos and then there's a huge list by some designer. So it's not the easiest thing to weed through. But there is somebody on there that I was surprised that I didn't realize, or I guess I just wasn't thinking, they made several other good games. And so my favorite game by this person is Airlines Europe. I did not expect Alan R. Moon to be one of my top designers, but I really, really, really like Airlines Europe. And the Ticket to Ride games are fantastic. I really like Ticket to Ride. Now, of course, if you tell me, hey, Alan R. Moon's making a new game, the first thing I ask is, well, is it another Ticket to Ride?
Right. What country is it now?
Yeah, exactly.
He ran out. It's now Ticket to Ride in Space.
It's Ticket to Ride Legacy now, which I would
surprisingly I want to play.
Like to play.
Yeah,
but
right.
The games that I owned that I didn't realize were Alan R. Moon games, or at least not when I was thinking about it, was the entire 10 Days In series is Alan R. Moon. Yeah. So I have 10 Days in Africa. I have 10 Days in Europe, because those are, one has the car wild mechanic where the other one has the boats. But there's the Americas and Asia and USA as well. And I've played some of those others, but
is it 1-to-1 for every Ticket to Ride expansion? He makes it 10 days in that country.
I mean, there's at least 5 of 10 Days In games, but they're all good. They're all, I think, out of print and therefore a little bit expensive. But I wouldn't say like it's not the game that I'm going to pull out and sit down at game night and play, but I love playing these games with my kids. And I bought Europe and Africa specifically because those are ones that have a lot of challenging geography, right? Mm-hmm. So my kids are learning geography and we're playing a game and we're having a good time. Just a lot of countries in those two continents. And then the other game, which again, I think is a game that I wouldn't necessarily pull out at my game night, although I would consider it, but my kids love it. We played Quacks of Quedlinburg, and so I figured out that they love the push your luck mechanism. Well, Alan R. Moon made Ink and Gold. That's a co-design of his, maybe with Fiduti, I can't remember, right? There's another version of it called Diamant, I think. But yeah, I didn't, that is an excellent distilled push your luck game. And when you take all of those things together, because I really do love Airlines Europe, and Ticket to Ride is great for pretty much any group, I guess. Especially, as John and I talked about, the team Ticket to Ride Asia is great, even for a large group of people who play heavier games. It's a nice change of pace. But then you throw in those games that I love to play with my kids, Ink and Gold and 10 Days In, and he just ended up, he really ended up at number 3 on my list, because Knizia would have been 2. But yeah.
Pretty sure I just saw Erock look over and mentally cross Fiduti off his extras list.
I did not cross Fiduti.
Fiduti does not sound like an Erock designer. No, I don't think
he's
so.
listed every designer. He's just he's got the...
Well, did you cross off Alan R. Moon? That's the question.
I did not.
But did you realize he made all those other games?
I did not realize he made all those other games. Yes.
I considered Alan for the list. I just didn't think he made enough games for the scope of what I was looking for this list. I knew he did Europe, which I love, Airlines Europe. I love Ticket to Ride and the 10-Day series, but really, that's 3 games. There's just 27 offshoots of each game, which there's nothing wrong with that, but to me, that counts as one game for the talk of a unique design.
You liked Ink and Gold when we played.
Yeah. I forgot he did Ink and Gold,
yeah.
But I remember the other 3.
I will say I did buy an Alan R. Moon game because it was Alan R. Moon. In fact, I backed it on crowdfunding, and that game was a bit of a stinker. I didn't like it. I got rid of it, and that was that Aftershock, San Francisco and Venice or whatever it was. And I don't know I'd go so far as to say it was bad, but I didn't like it, and I got rid of it. So a little bit of a knock there, but still, with all those other games, I decided to go ahead and put Alan R. Moon up here.
I will give a shout out to 10 Days. The game is so simple, and it should be just dumb fun, but it's fun every time you play it. There's not a lot to it, and it's an educational game, but it's just fun to play.
I love when you're doing the setup and things are sort of working out, and you're like, oh, this is going to be great, but then other things get in there, and you're like, crap, what am I going to do with this? And then you got to figure out what to do with it, right? And then
it's like Rummy. Someone goes out, and you're like, oh, there's a car away from Tasmania.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've never played any of those games, they're so easy to learn, they're so easy to play, and they're so short. I recommend giving it a shot, like at a convention or something where there's a copy available. So... all right, cool. That is 2 laps around. Erock, let's do it again.
All right. Well, Babe bucked tradition and went out of order. So I believe we're going to have a crossover here. I knew what Babe was choosing, so it helped me a lot because it was I was able to take those people off my list.
That's collusion.
This is why I make Erock go first.
Right? So I was like, that's great. I get to knock some people off here. Babe will talk about them. I don't have to keep them in consideration. But at the end of the day, I have to put Vladimír Suchý on my list. I really, really enjoy his games. I have a feeling Babe's going to talk about him here in a minute, about it being her first choice here. But so I'm going to leave a lot of that steam to her. But I'm just saying, Underwater Cities is fantastic. We both absolutely love it. Last Will is a lot of fun. Pulsar 2849, that game is surprisingly good. It didn't really get a lot of buzz, and not a lot of people play that. That game's really cool. It's not what it looks like. It's really just kind of a point salad, fly around this planet-ish, galaxy, whatever, solar system, and do whatever you want to do kind of a thing. And it's super fun. And of course, he did Shipyard, which I think was really good. We have Prague on the shelf we haven't played yet. And I'd also really like to play Woodcraft that just recently came out. And I really, really like Suchi's games.
Woodcraft
is almost Lacerda-ish. It's not quite that level of deep and long, but it's kind of that same grind that he puts in your head, where you really got to puzzle this out. How am I going to do this? What am I going to do next? And how do I get there? And I love the feel of those games. So that's going to be my number 3, is going to be Vladimír Suchý. Babe?
Tiffany, what's your number 1 favorite game designer?
Is it my turn? We're not going in order, are we? Like, well, did you? I was lagging. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. But I will just go ahead and piggyback and say yes. Vladimír Suchý, number one. I think when I looked at my three choices, Vladimír Suchý, Ryan Laukat, and Vidal Lacerda, Ryan Laukat was an easy third place because his games aren't super deep. Like just loving his art style isn't a great reason for him to be my favorite designer of all time. So I was like, all right, he's third place. And then looking between Vidal Lacerda and Vladimír Suchý, I definitely love Vidal Lacerda games, but they don't like capture me like Vladimír Suchý's games do. Last fun game, and it's lighthearted and it's silly. It's a lot of fun to go blow a shit ton of money with your horse and your butler, and just have a great time spending money. Pulsar 2849 is a really fun sci-fi. It makes you make some cool decisions. I love sandbox games, so it's one of those. But Cities is my all time. Like that, if I've got several hours and I really want to play something I'm going to desperately love, I want to play Underwater Cities. So it was easy to choose Vladimír Suchý as my number one favorite designer because his games are just so good. I love them so much. He doesn't have a whole lot that I necessarily love, but the games that he has made that I do love, I love them a lot.
So I don't know if I've played a lot of Vladimír Suchý games, but I have played Last Will, and I do really like Last Will. It's interesting because, like you said, thematically it grabs you. I'm not sure I would have ever played Last Will except for the theme, right? I mean, the whole artwork and the time period and just that Brewster's Millions sort of concept.
Brewster's Millions things. Yeah. It hooks you. You're like, you explain the game to someone, like, I don't get it. You're like Brewster's Millions. Like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it hooks them as long as they're over 40 years old.
Really going to be good these days, though.
It's like
50 years ago, there was this movie.
Point, right?
Yeah. It's this Brewster's Millions set in the Victorian era. Brewster's what? Richard Pryor and John Candy. Who?
Right, exactly. Richard Pryor and John
what
Candy.
era?
Who? What? Are they the designers? I don't what?
Time for bed, Grandpa.
All right, cool. So, John, what do you got for us?
It was the crossover Laukat.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah,
of course.
Stole both of our thunder.
Crossover round.
Yeah. Well, not with me. So I was going back and forth between two designers here, for my third place. And it was tough. And these are two people that it's probably more quantity than anything. Like, they made a lot of really good games. I'm not sure any of them are like top 20 for me, but they're just really good games. And so ultimately I went with Antoine Bauza. And
okay.
That is, and so he's, probably his favorite game of mine is Hanabi. So Hanabi was amazing when it came out, right? We talk about The Crew being an excellent cooperative trick-taking game, but
Hanabi stormed the world.
Yeah,
right.
when Hanabi came out, like, there was nothing like that, right? With The Crew, you're like, well, it's kind of like Hanabi, right? Yeah, there's one way to do it, right? But yeah, like this cooperative, I have the domino version instead of the card version, right? But that is just an interesting and fun puzzle to play with your friends. And, that just at the time, that was a crazy design, and I still think it holds up. So, that is my favorite game from him. But I also have, a really fancy version of Tokaido. We've talked about Tokaido several times on here, and I like the tension there of, I love time track games, and that's a time track game to me, right? How far do you want to jump ahead? How many things do you want to skip to make sure you get the thing that you want? And how many things are you going to leave behind for your opponents? Like, I love that, and that's what Tokaido is all about. And plus the artwork is fantastic in that game. It's excellent. And then Seven Wonders, of course, we talk about a lot. For a while, that was sort of the drafting
It's
game.
one of the
that
evergreen
everybody-
games.
Yeah, well, it still is an evergreen game, and they've made 1 million spin-offs of it. I mean, probably his highest rated game is Seven Wonders Duel, and I've never played that. I have played Seven Wonders Architect, which I mean, I kind of want to say that's a stinker, but really it's just because it's not made for me, right? Like, it's just too simple. So I don't want to knock it too harshly, right? For the right people, it's a great game, but it's just not good for me. So yeah, a lot of Seven Wonders games, a lot of spin-offs, but also Draftosaurus. I really enjoy Draftosaurus, and the expansions and stuff. I'll play that with my kids. That's another one of his designs. And there was this other game called Victorian Masterminds that won some awards, but still flew under the radar somehow. I think it won Mensa Select or something, and you could get it on nothing clearance, which is how I got a copy of it. So anyway, I mean, there's a bunch of games that I like. There's a bunch of games I didn't even mention that he designed. Like, I don't know, did he do Takanoko maybe or something? I don't even remember what all the other games he has designed are. But
A long list.
yeah, and so and since we're here in honorable mention territory, then I'll just say the person that I was jockeying with, like, which order do I want to put these two folks, was somebody else that I did not expect to be high on my list, but is Bruno Cathala. And part of that is just because I've been playing Orichalcum a lot lately, and I really like that. So that sort of brings it to the front. But Jamaica is probably my favorite game by him. I think that's an excellent game. We've talked about that on the channel. King Domino is, a game I played a lot with my kids. I like Dice Town, which there's been a couple of different versions of. So those are all games I own. Games of his that I really like but don't own. I think Raptor is one of the best 2-player games ever made.
Yeah, Raptor, we have that.
Yeah, and that's him. He did Shadows over Camelot, which I think is a pretty good game. It's co-op with a trader. I didn't like the expansion, Merlin's Company, at all. And Mission Red Planet, which I think is a really good game as long as you don't play it at 6 players. It's just a little too chaotic at 6 players, but a lower player count.
No, it's best at 6. It is so chaotic. It's glorious.
It's so chaotic you might as well just be randomly choosing your card to play, right? Like, I like to have some strategy. Games? Yeah. But and to be honest, I don't like Abyss, right? Like, Abyss is a stinker, right? So
it's a great game.
A lot of people love it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, blah blah. But
yeah, it's a good game.
But so like, there are a bunch of, like, he is a prolific game designer. He's made a lot of games that a lot of people like. I was just surprised that he sort of rose up on my list. A lot of other designers I looked at, there's several designers that have done 2 games that I really, really, really like. Like maybe top 2, top 20 games of mine or something. But then that's like all I've played by them. You look at Bruno Cathala and it's like, wow, I like a lot of these games. He's made a lot and I like a lot. So that's where he ended up.
Who made Ave Caesar?
I don't know, actually, offhand.
I hope they didn't make the list.
Enough. Maybe.
I'm going to jump in with an honorable
mention
before Erock does, and I'm going to say Isaac Childres. He couldn't make the list for me because he's literally only designed 1 game I like, but there's literally like 500 hours of game in there. So, like, if you get
3 versions of the same, it was hard.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It was hard for me to keep him off my list. He was definitely going to be one of my honorable mentions because I agree. Because Gloomhaven's awesome, Jaws of the Lion's awesome, and I hope Frosthaven is also awesome. But at the end of the day, it's really just 1 game. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I couldn't quite put him on the list for that. But really, if you stacked up my favorite games of all time in board game hours, it would probably still be less combined than I've put into Isaac Childress design. So
yeah,
we've only got really the 1 game, but it's so amazing that it almost transcends the requirements of this list. So he's an honorable mention and not on the list, but he is a fantastic designer.
He almost made my top 3 with 1 game. I agree, because put so much time into that 1 game, had so much fun playing it. So I hear you. Proceed.
Wow. That is an interesting idea, that the games or designers you've spent the most time with. I don't.
For real, it would be Isaac Childress. Absolutely.
Well, not
we
for
played
me,
so much Jaws of the Lion and Gloomhaven. That has got to be the most time I've ever spent on a designer. It has to be.
I mean, the game that I've spent far and away the most time on in my entire life doesn't even have a designer. So which
That's
is
interesting. Now that I'm thinking about it,
chess.
right? Well, it had a
Let's
designer. I
go.
just don't know who
Some
to do it.
shogi.
I've probably Larry Harris. He's probably in my top 2 or 3 because I
Of Axis
played
and Allies.
so much Axis and Allies in like high school. So much Axis and Allies.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Who did diplomacy? I've spent so much time playing diplomacy. But anyway, I got some honorable mentions for y'all.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Hit it.
First of all, y'all mentioned a whole lot of them. So you shortened this speech of mine quite considerably. Thank you very much. I want to start with Eric Long. I really enjoy his games. I just feel like they're all evolutions of the same game. So it really makes it hard for me to put him as one of my top ones. Not all. There's some off here and there, but I feel like his big hits
His successful
are all
games,
like evolutions of the same game right down the line. So that kind of made it hard for me.
I don't like Blood Rage, but I recognize that almost everyone else in the world loves it, so I'll make the concession.
Understood. And I mean, really, like Blood Rage is Rising Sun. It's just change a couple of the mechanisms and put it in Japan, like which is like it's all the same.
It didn't have enough minis in it, so they had to re-implement.
Right.
Wait, did he do Godfather? Is that the same
Yes.
thing
Yes.
again?
Godfather. Yeah. And I have Chaos in the Old World, which I thought was fantastic, but really that's all the same thing. It's so Eric Long, Alexander Pfister. I've enjoyed a lot of his games. I haven't played Maracaibo yet, but Western Trail is fantastic. Mombasa is awesome. He makes some really nice games.
He was on my short list, but he was one of those people that I only really like 2 of his games, and they're not the big heavy games. It's Port Royal and Isle of Skye. Those are the games that I love by him. Which
kind of the opposite for me. Like I love Western Trail and I thought Mombasa was awesome too. And I thought his other games were okay.
Too.
They were good.
Yeah, you would like Maracaibo. You should try it.
I want to go to Jamey Stegmaier. Man, he makes some good games, man. Viticulture, Tapestry, Scythe, Expeditions. These are all Stegmaier games. My one problem with Jamey Stegmaier is I don't feel like he's had that one game that just blew me away. But I've really enjoyed all of his games.
He 90% designs a lot of great games.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Hey, the Grande in Viticulture was I mean, there are other worker placement games where you could I went here with 1 meeple, so you have to come here with 2 meeples or whatever. But the whole Grande thing where it's sort of almost like bumping, right? Like where I just have this one super person who can go wherever you want to ensure that you can get at least 1 thing in every round. I don't remember seeing that before Viticulture, so that's pretty.
But it also wasn't in the base game, which is my complaint about him. That he just
but he's
iterates
still
on his game so many times.
It would be one thing if he played some other game and saw that mechanism was like, oh, I should bring that into my game, but he didn't. I think he recognized that his game needed that, and then he invented this whole new mechanism, and that's I don't know, better.
I agree with both you guys on that, because on the one hand, I want a complete package when I buy the game, but on the other hand, I very much appreciate that he's willing to change the game as time goes on.
He should sit and design an expansion that has all this stuff in it instead of going expansion pack 1, upgrade, expansion pack 2. And it's just I don't even know what I'm supposed to have at this point. I could not tell you which yellow deck I have in my Viticulture right now because it's had 4 different iterations.
Yeah,
I've gone through all of them. I don't know which one it is.
That's true. I didn't go through the pain, right? I bought the collector's edition, which didn't end up even being the definitive edition, which came later or whatever. But I just bought 1 version and it's fine. It has all the stuff in there that you need.
And
I
you
didn't
had the
have to
version
go
where
through that other stuff.
He already changed how you make wine. There was an entire mechanic that was just too clunky to explain, and he had to upgrade that. And it's just I appreciate it. I'm glad that it's a complete game now, but I didn't expect patch notes on my board.
You wish all of that had happened in the design process, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I understand. I also have to mention Uwe Rosenberg.
Who?
This is one of these. Yeah,
the bean trading guy.
This is one of these guys where I'm not that big of a fan of a lot of his games, but there are some really good games that I very much like.
Didn't he do that game about agriculture?
Yes, he's done 1 or 2 about agriculture as far as it goes. And for me, his home run is A Feast for Odin. I think it's fantastic. I also recognize that it is a lot for most people, but for me, it is fantastic. So thank you, Uwe. He also did, Patchwork, if you want to go to the lighter side of the whole thing. And yeah, of course, Bonanza. So his breadth is amazing.
I saw a thread where people were talking about things that they see in a game design, and they're like, "Oh, that's neat," but the novelty quickly wears off, or you end up hating it. And having to feed your people was a very popular thing there. I feel like that's a very Uwe thing from Agricola and. Well, actually,
yeah, and you know what's funny is like they kind of stopped doing that in the hobby, but he didn't.
Merlin has something like that, which you mentioned, Feld. Well, you have to defend the wall, or you get beat up by the invaders or whatever. Right? There's that whole mechanism. You lose points.
You're thinking of a different game.
No. I mean,
yeah. You gotta get the banners. That's easy though. Those guys are easy to beat.
But it's the same thing as feeding your workers, right? It's like you have to spend some actions doing this thing, otherwise there's a negative consequence.
It's a mandatory action that has a penalty if you don't fulfill it. Yes.
Yeah. Sure. But in Agricola, it is so depressing that if you don't feed your people, you have lost the game, your family dies, your farm burns down. In this, it's like 9 total points if you ignore the entire thing. In Agricola, you have completely ruined your family. So I think it's just a matter of measure. But you are absolutely correct that is in Merlin.
And my last honorable mention is Cole Wehrle. He was briefly mentioned earlier. He would probably have made my list, but I have a hard time actually getting his games on the table. And it's mostly because of what I love about him. And he takes games to a different place. His games are about different things than most games are about. Where somebody might make a game about, I don't know, growing orchids in China, he made a game about heroin and opium and shipping it back to England. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where his mind's at. He made Root. Root is this cutesy woodland little... No, it's not. Root is a vicious war game. So he just, he takes an idea and kind of sideways it almost. And I really like the way that he approaches these. You mentioned John Company earlier. I really like John Company. I don't know if I could teach that. I don't know if I could get that experience across, because it's so, it's not even like it's convoluted. It's almost just incredibly obtuse what's going on here. Like, you're playing this framework and you don't really even understand what's going on behind it almost. But it's fantastic and it makes sense. I really love his philosophy. Like I said, it's really hard to get those games on the table. A, because, they're a little off. And B, I don't know if I can teach them really, but I really like what he's doing. And I keep backing his games. Every time something comes up crowdfunding, I'm like, oh, Cole Wehrle made that. Oh, I'm in. And then it sits on the shelf for a long time.
The ultimate aspirational games of I'd love to play this someday.
Oh, that's a good point. I think he actually replaced somebody for me who actually he traces back to, and that's Phil Eckland. I think for a long time, I romanticized Phil Eckland about, they're so precise, these creations that he makes and all of this. And I was really enamored by that idea. And that's kind of where Cole Wehrle came from. But he takes it to a different level that's just so much more interesting to me. So that's my honorable mentions list.
By the way, Stephen, real quick, in Merlin, I can take care of those invaders with Excalibur. If Uwe gave me a sword to solve my hunger problems, I wouldn't hate the game.
A sword would solve your hunger problems.
That's what I'm saying. Just give me the sword, Uwe. Give me the sword.
Promo card.
Yeah, the promo. Excalibur solves
not
hunger
that there's
problems.
enough promo decks for Agricola.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of other people that were on my short list that I basically ended up scratching off just because there are 2 games of theirs that I really like. So I'll just quickly give them shout outs. And one of them is Matthias Cramer, right? Because I love Kraftwagen. That's one of my favorite games. Every time I play it, I go back to look and see, should I raise this one higher up on my list? But he also did Glenmore, which is a really good game too in its own right. So those 2 games combined, make him, a game designer. I'd love to have his stuff on my shelves, but it's just 2 things. And then The other one, not quite as high to that extent, is Dirk Henn, because I really like San Francisco cable car or Metro, whichever version you call it. I have San Francisco cable car with the stock company, and I love playing with the stock bits included in the game, because normally you have your color trains and you're trying to connect them to make the most loops or whatever, connect to the middle for double points, or just cover the most area. But with the stock company, you don't actually own. It's sort of like Airlines Europe. You don't actually own any of the airlines. You don't actually own any of the color rail lines. You're getting stock in the rail lines, so you only get a portion of the points for whatever. So I like that about it. It's not nearly as depth of a stock game as Airlines Europe, but I like that little addition to it, and that pushes it from being a good game to a great game, in my opinion. I love playing cable car, but I also like Alhambra. Alhambra was an early, game for my game group, and that was the game that I could never win. Although I think I subsequently have figured out how to actually play Alhambra, but it's got that. Do I want to just buy what's on offer? Do I want to take money so I have exact change so I get 2 or more actions on a future turn? I can't just wait to grab things because there's multiple scoring rounds and I don't know when they're going to come out. So, do I need to grab the stuff now or what? And do I need to worry about trying to build a long wall versus trying to collect sets or whatever? What's the important thing are you trying to do here? So Alhambra's got a lot of good stuff going on there. And, it's got a million expansions that could change the game 10 different ways if you want to, but even just the base game is pretty good. So, those are really my honorable mentions. John, you got anybody else?
Those are all the ones I wanted to mention, and a lot were touched upon by other people, and then the Isaac Childress was the last one I wanted to talk about, but everyone that was on my list has been mentioned. I could probably do a top 10 out of just people that we mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right at the top, I mentioned Knizia, but I didn't actually say what Knizia games I actually have. So
my favorite is Raw. Just putting that out there.
Well, this is probably not a comprehensive list, but I have Raw, Winner's Circle, Decathlon, which is an excellent game where you can get for free from his website. You just need dice. Sakura, which my wife and kids love Sakura. I have Rapido, which is a version of Escape, so a dice game. My kids love playing that. Quest for El Dorado, I got a copy to give to my kids at Christmas. I think they might like that game. I don't know. It's got a little bit of a sort of pressure luck, sort of blocking
that's
and being
the
mean
race
to
game?
people.
Yeah,
it is a racing game.
Yeah, that's a
deck building race game.
Deck building race game. Age of War, I got on some cheap sale once upon a time, so I still have that one. Let's see, what else have I got here? I've got Great Wall of China and Gold Digger. I've got Knizia games coming out of my ears. And, like I said, I used to have a bunch that I got rid of. I used to have Tigris and Euphrates, which is probably his highest rated game, at least on Board Game Geek. It is a bit of a travesty that just recently, within the last year or so, there isn't a Knizia game in the top 100 on Board Game Geek anymore. I think Tigris and Euphrates was at 104 when I looked this morning. So, yeah.
That would be number 2 on my Knizia list, is Tigris and Euphrates.
Yeah,
it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to explain, but where you think the game should go is not where that game goes at all. It's just different.
Well, once you get Winner's Circle, it can replace Tigris and Euphrates number 2 for you. But Tigris and Euphrates just has that problem that you can't just play it with somebody, right? You have to be playing it with somebody who's at your level, because you're either going to get crushed or you're going to crush them. So you kind of have to have these people that you discovered the game with and played with them. Otherwise, it's just not that great of an experience. So that sort of dings the game a bit for me, and it's part of the reason I got rid of it. Right? I was sort of,
and it's kind of an acquired taste on top of that, and it's really hard for modern gamers to go through that, because I'd just rather play something else really than have to go through this acquired taste to learn the nuances of a game.
Yeah, if you don't grok a game on the first play, why play it again? You got 100 other games you could play, right? And that's that's tough. That's not how games used to be. Games used to have layer after layer after layer, and people could tell you like, oh, you got to play this game 5 or 6 times before you see the beauty in it. And people would be like, okay, and then you would do it because, you know,
Because you only had 12 games.
yeah, or there just weren't that
12
many
games in a
around,
tumbleweed in the industry.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, now like that doesn't cut it. You've got to have. There's got to be that first layer has to reveal itself in one play to get somebody interested enough to dig for that second layer.
That game is not even the only game that came out that day.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's tough, right? I mean, I guess somebody who is tight on a budget financially maybe will buy a game and then dig into it. But I think somebody like that will probably do a lot of research on a game before they buy it, so they'll
Probably,
you know,
yeah.
So I'm not sure that would even happen to them. So yeah,
It's just a different world. That's all.
yeah. I mean, I kind of felt that way when I was talking about whatever that game we played was, John, Ancient Knowledge, right? Where it had
Yes, yeah.
it has not really that many Take That cards in there, but they're in there. And then I played it with a guy who just loves Take That, and right off the bat he was playing Take That cards in this game that where I think Take That doesn't belong, and I'm just like, well, I played that game now. I never want to play it again, right? And I probably could play that game again and have a perfectly pleasant and possibly enjoyable experience, just because that's not how the cards came up and how they were played. But you know, game designers are playing with fire. You give me one bad experience, why the hell am I going to go back to your game?
I would love to play it again, but I know absolutely without a doubt I'll never get it to the table again. So I've just written it off. I'll never even try, because it was that daunting and like different of an experience that nobody else at the table enjoyed, and I understand why they didn't enjoy it while I did. So I just like, the game doesn't exist to me anymore because no one will ever want to play it.
And that's a brand new
that.
game, right? Like I don't even know if it has North American distribution yet. Oh, by the way, Brian Klein in the chat said hello. He's a game designer, so there you go. What an appropriate list for him to join. Sorry, Brian, you didn't make our list of favorite game designers, but yeah.
But y'all, our viewers, stay tuned because we will be doing a preview for one of his upcoming games.
Yeah.
Very nice guy. Very good game designer. Stay tuned.
All right. As a former game designer, I can't imagine having designed hundreds of games like some of these people. It's a lot of work. Well, it's a lot of work to do well, right? I mean, there's a lot of my one game that I actually managed to get published despite signing like 4 publishing contracts, the only one that ever actually got printed, I designed it in like 20 minutes while I was doing the dishes. And then I spent 3 years fixing it, right? I mean, obviously not 3 years full time, right?
Jamey Stegmaier, is that you?
I would go to play testing events, right? We had local play testing events. We had a local game design convention back in the day. I went to all those things. I found a play testing group in Greece to blind play test my game. They were like, yeah, if you send us the print and play files and a few euro for snacks, we'll play your game and give you feedback. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Right. So, you know, like there's just all these hoops you got to jump through. And then once your game is good, you got to get a publisher to notice you. I mean, you go to these conventions and you try to get these publishers to notice you. You message them beforehand or whatever. And it's just, they're drowning in game designs. Everybody and their brother is a game designer. And you can't tell just looking at the elevator pitch sheet whether somebody's actually put in the time to make a good game or not, right? So yeah, it's tough, man. So hats off to these game designers. I mean, I guess once you have a few titles under your belt, then people, you know, they respect you. The publishers are what move you to the top of the list for the games they're looking at, right? You know.
Yeah, it's crazy because there's another design of yours that I absolutely love. It should absolutely be a published game, but it's been more of a challenge to try to get that where it needs to be than it was for a game you designed in 20 minutes. So it's a crazy industry. It really is.
Yeah. So
Brian says 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So
yeah, exactly. You can spend a lot of time. And to be honest, I have worked on designs and beat my head against that design. Play tested, beat my head against it. Play tested, beat my head against it, only to just decide that, you know, this thing that I'm trying to do isn't going to work. It's not going to work. Just shelve that design. And I know people like Knizia say things like that, right? I think he does a quick pass on a design, puts it on a shelf, and then comes back a few months later and pulls it out to see if he's still interested in it. Or, I can't remember if that was him, right?
Hold on, you're saying there's things that he doesn't publish?
Yeah, a lot.
That's crazy. That's crazy because of just the sheer volume of what he does publish.
Yeah, well, he's been around for a while. He's been a full-time designer since the late 90s, I think it is, 97 maybe. But, because he's a mathematician. Yeah, I think he was a banker. I think he was on the board of a bank or something before he retired to do full-time game design. He has a PhD in mathematics. Actually got his master's degree in the United States. I didn't realize that, from like Syracuse or something. But his PhD is from Germany. I think his PhD...
he's just showing off at this point.
Yeah. Well, I recognize the math in his games, right? Like when you play...
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
I know all those numbers too. There's like 1
They're
and
all
2.
like abstract puzzles is what they are. And sometimes a theme works.
But yeah, I mean, you look at Winner Circle, for instance, right? And you could just look at the horse die and then the different numbers on the different horses and you go, oh, that's mathematically balanced, I mean, that wasn't hard to do, right? Somebody with my level of math knowledge can do that kind of balancing, but he did it, right? And he made sure it was balanced. It's great.
But I love Ready, Set, Bet. Sometimes you got to bet on the underdog to win.
Yeah. I did consider John D. Clair for this list. He's done
solid.
He's done some good stuff. I wasn't a huge fan of Cubitos, and I haven't played Dead Reckoning. I think Dead Reckoning might be my favorite game by him if I ever played it. That I might really like it. What was the one? Rolling Heights also didn't get the best reviews recently. It had some clunkiness to it, but yeah, he's been putting out some good stuff. That's Space Base, right? Yeah,
I think it'd be
Clair.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a lot more popular if you changed the D to an E.
Johnny Clair.
Yeah, I'm already excited.
That would be awesome.
Actually, I have a game of his that's supposed to come this month. Possibly the last game I ever crowdfunded. Empire's End, which is a Civ building game with the no thanks mechanism.
Oh, do you want this Empire?
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, it's a disaster, and you have to commit resources to preventing the disaster. But whoever committed the least ends up taking the disaster, but then maybe they get those resources. I don't know. There's some sort of, basically people described it as the no thanks mechanism. We'll see how close it is. But yeah, at some point you're just like, all right, well, I'll take the disaster because the disaster's not that bad for me the way I'm set up. And then I get all this stuff for doing it. Like, all right, well, that sounds fun. One of my friends said he played it at Gen Con and was a little disappointed, so maybe I should tamper my enthusiasm. But if I were to just say to you, hey, John D. Clair made a Civ game with the no thanks mechanism, did I just sell you on the game? Yeah, right?
You got me interested, at the very least.
Yeah, so that is the power of actually knowing the game designers, which I know of half of them in my game collection probably.
See, though, if you told me that this box is full of John E. Clair, again, I'm more excited at that point. I'm buying that box.
Well, so stretch goals in the future. An Clair in every box.
A box of donuts.
That's about as
way
good.
more games.
That's about as good as some of the stretch goals I see on these crowdfunding campaigns. Yeah. I love the ones that have like T-shirts and stuff as an add-on. Like they're just throwing anything at the wall. Not that they have any clue about the complexities of how complex it gets every time you add one more thing as an add-on as a fulfillment option.
It's now 2 years late because the T-shirts weren't printed in time.
Yeah, plus just the logistics of, wait, who's getting what now? I got to combine what with what to ship what to
There's
who?
different size shirts? Who thought of this?
Yeah, good times. Good times. All right, Tiffany, did you have any honorable mentions for favorite game designers?
No. I followed the rules. I picked 3. I stuck with those 3. That's it.
For honorable mentions
respect
are
it.
all the ones that I had.
Yeah. Well,
Are there any left to say?
are there
we
any
got
other
them all.
game designers in history that, yeah. Well, you know how it is. I mean, when you're making a list, rarely do I just go, well, here's the 3, right? I make 10 or 5, and then you got to narrow it down. So that's where my honorable mentions come from. In fact,
My favorite is.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
My favorite is John Chess, who accidentally invented chess when he tried to play checkers twice at the same time.
Well, that's my favorite game designer then. John Clair Chess.
Johnny Clair Chess.
I have played a version of chess that was shot glasses. When you took somebody's piece, you had to drink it, which theoretically meant that it's like a catch-up mechanism.
It's like a catch-up method. Yeah, exactly. The better you are, the more you drink.
Yeah,
Problem is you don't remember who won.
I chose peach schnapps for my opponent's pieces, and that was a mistake. After a few peach schnapps, you're like, this is sickeningly sweet. What am I doing? But, whatever. There's your adult entertainment. Shot glass chess.
Yeah.
Where is that board? I don't even know. All right. Well, on that note,
I think we're done here.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I'm Steven. That's Erock. That's John. That's Tiffany. We've been talking about our favorite game designers. If you enjoy hearing us talk about things like this, go ahead and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss stuff like this. Give us a like if you enjoyed this video. That does help us out. And if you look in the description of the video, I think right now it already has a link to our Discord channel where we talk about games. I'll also go and add chapters in here later for people that are interested in hearing about some of the game designers. But thanks for joining us tonight, and see you next time.
Bye. Have a beautiful time.